What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. Yeah, that's right. We have video, and you can see what we look like and tell us if we look like you thought we looked like. That makes sense? Adam Azer with Dave Richard and Ben Gretsch. You know, Heath was supposed to be on the show today, and he had Deebo Samuel as one of his busts. And Deebo's out, and Heath is out today. Heath will be back next week. So I would have to agree with Heath at this point. 63rd overall is too early for Deebo Samuel. He's out 3 to 4 months. But holy cow, Ben just wrote an article about it for the website, cbsports.com/fantasy. All right, so here's the first question. Should Brandon Aiyuk be the first rookie wide receiver drafted?
No.
I think it's close.
I don't think it's not close for me. Not yet. He was someone that I thought had a lot of good talent and athleticism, but wasn't quite NFL ready.
I have a question then. Would you take him over Deebo?
Not yet, but okay. They're going to be pretty close in my rankings, Ben.
I'm going to move Aiyuk over Deebo, and I like Aiyuk.
I hear that.
Yeah, I think people are. I think as a fantasy community, we were a little bit lower on Aiyuk than maybe the 49ers were. Remember, they traded up to draft him in the first round.
Shanahan loved him.
Yeah, and he has that yak ability. He had a great return profile in junior college. Before his time at ASU, he was less of a returner at ASU, but he still did it, and he had a punt return touchdown. He did it more as a part-time guy and was still successful at it. And those types of skills actually tend to be a little bit predictive of future success. They tend to be predictive of yak ability and ball skill or ball and hand skills. I don't know. I'm saying that weird, but being able to make plays after the catch. And that's what the 49ers scheme is predicated on. It's not just George Kittle's skill set and Deebo Samuel's skill set that leads to such high yak numbers. It's their whole scheme. I mean, they run so much misdirection off their run game, so much play action off their run game. So Aiyuk is like, if they're going to miss Samuel for any amount of time, Aiyuk's going to be a really good fit in that way.
Yeah, it's important that I put the time frame out there because he's out 3 to 4 months. And if he's out 3 months, he might miss a week or two. You know, that would be best case scenario.
Yeah.
He could also go on short-term IR. You know, go on the PUP. Obviously,
there's already talk that the PUP list is a possibility.
Yeah, there's talk, but if it's truly 3 months, we're recording this on June 18th, July, August, September.
We're exactly 12 weeks from the Thursday kickoff game. You noted that I wrote the article, so I did a little research.
Okay.
The commentary was 12 to 16 weeks. You should expect him back. We are exactly 12 weeks from the Thursday kickoff game. So the short end of that would be he could be back by week 1, sure. But that's also pretty optimistic for a couple of reasons. One, Deebo Samuel has a lengthy injury history dating back to his time at South Carolina. Has never really been healthy. He wasn't a very productive college player because he was always banged up. And then number 2, this specific injury, the Jones fracture, has a high rate of re-injury, is something you do not want to rush back from. We've seen it a lot throughout recent NFL history. I believe Des Bryant had it. Julio Jones had it early in his career. It was a contributing factor to Hakeem Nicks falling off significantly as he tried to rush back a little early. There's some positive examples there and also some negative ones. And I don't think with a young player, the Niners will have any interest in rushing him back too early with this type of injury.
All right, second question then. And then I'll do one more about Garoppolo. But second question, George Kittle. You know, on a per-game basis, basically the same as Travis Kelce, but he played 2 fewer games. I mentioned the 2 games he missed were against the 2 best matchups for tight ends, and Jimmy Garoppolo threw 91 passes in those 2 games. I can't even imagine what Kittle would have done against Arizona and Seattle. He probably would have finished as the number 1 tight end, and maybe people would take him ahead of Kelce. Does this help George Kittle? Does this move him to the first tight end off the board?
It's close. I hesitate to do it because I just know that Travis Kelce just feels safer, and we've seen the touchdowns from him more so than Kittle. But you think about it, where's the ball going to go here? Okay, it's a team that wants to run the ball quite a bit anyway. But if there's no Deebo and Emmanuel Sanders is gone, he's in New Orleans, then it's Aiyuk, it's Kittle for sure, Is Jalen Hurd going to be good enough? Does Dante Pettis get another shot? Does Kendrick Bourne refine his identity? That was bad. Sorry. Do the running backs get more involved? Does McKinnon get more involved? I think Kittle's going to end up seeing a lot more looks from Garoppolo after this. And that means coverage is going to be tighter on him too. But those catches they'll be there. I think it could be pretty close in the PPR, and I'm more inclined to take him now in round 2 than I was before this injury.
So I kind of go the other way, where I would say I don't think I'm moving Kittle around. Like I already had Kittle basically maxed out for what I think his role could be in this offense. I didn't know that I was limiting him, or I wasn't limiting him in any kind of way because of the other receivers on this offense necessarily. They weren't that deep. It's a couple of young guys, so somebody else is going to play. I don't think Kittle can get like 35% of the targets now. I mean, I think I was already maxing him out pretty much.
If he was going to get 35% of the targets, then that's an easy guy to put ahead of Kelsey. So I don't think we're going to do that. The question is, before I was okay taking Kittle in late round 2. I would have preferred it in early round 3 because I'd always prefer to get players around later than where we're talking. But now I feel like he can get you off to like a little bit more volume without Deebo Samuel there. So I wouldn't hate it if he's there in round 2. But I'm not going to move him ahead of Kelsey.
All right, last question. Does this ruin Jimmy Garoppolo's sleeper appeal? Let's wrap up here so we can get into the busts. But Garoppolo, great yards per attempt, was spectacular when he took over as a starter in 2017. They were very run heavy last year, obviously, but maybe if they just throw more, there is sleeper appeal there, I think. But is it over now?
For now. You gotta wait and see how Aiyuk does in camp, how Jalen Hurd does in camp, and Hurd can end up being tremendous for them because that's a size speed combo that he was injured last year and he couldn't do much, but now that he has an opportunity and apparently he's training hard just like everybody else, doors open for him. Doors open for one of these receivers, and if the reports are Curtis Samuel good coming out of San Francisco, then that'll keep Garoppolo's star shining bright.
Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
No, Garoppolo.
You said Curtis Samuel.
I said Curtis Samuel, meaning remember all the hype about Curtis Samuel last year? I meant to say Curtis Samuel that time. Every single day there was a big highlight or a story about Curtis Samuel and how he looked like the best receiver that ever played in the history of the Carolina Panthers, and people were drafting him high because of it, and then he ended up stinking. Hopefully that doesn't happen to somebody in San Fran.
Trivia question. Name the top 2 running backs, or wide receivers in rushing yards last year.
Wide receivers, Deebo.
Deebo had to be one of them.
Deebo Samuel, number 1. Who is number 2?
In rush yards. Oh,
A.J. Brown had a long touchdown. Is this an A.J. Brown trick question?
Curtis Samuel. Both of the Samuels. 2 in rushing yards. Mm-hmm. All right, and there's your 49ers discussion to start the show, a bus show about the 49ers. Hey, it happens a lot with the team that loses in the Super Bowl, but we like them. Who would be your number 1 biggest bust? You guys each gave me 4 names. There are a lot more on the website. Heath also gave me 4 names. Deebo Samuel was one of them. I'll reveal the other 3 for Heath. But, Ben, bust numero uno for you. Who would it be?
Busts are tough, but I'm going to have to go, I think, right now with Raheem Mostert, which is kind of a shot at Dave because he had him as a breakout. I don't think that's crazy. I think Mostert either goes one of 2 ways. He either is this breakout that Dave talked about, or he's a pretty big bust. And right now I'm seeing kind of across the board, he's like a 4th-round pick right now. And he didn't go 4th in our expert mock right now, but his ADP seems to be right in that like 4th-round range. And to me, that's just evidence of an overcorrection right now. Everybody is really confident there's not enough running backs and you have to get your backs. But that doesn't mean that you chase a guy like Raheem Mostert with his profile into the 4th round, where you guys know I love all the 4th-round receivers. A.J. Brown, DJ Moore falls there sometimes. There's too many good names. Odell Beckham's available there sometimes. Way too many good wide receiver names available at that point to be taking someone who had almost no track record before last year, no receiving role. And then on a team that rotates, and last we saw Raheem Mostert in the playoffs, he was coming off that monster NFC Championship game and then getting basically benched for the first half of the Super Bowl for whatever reason. He was their backup again. This is a team that's going to rotate, and there is the potential for that big boom, but I can't chase a 27, 28-year-old running back up into the 4th round with this track record.
I wouldn't either. But I'd get him in round 6 or round 7.
Yeah.
I know Adam would take him in round 6 too, wouldn't you, Adam?
Yeah, we did a draft at 2 p.m. today. Right now it's 4:15. It was an industry draft. It was half PPR. I thought it was full PPR, full disclosure, because I'm so used to every draft we do. It's 3 receivers and a flex and full PPR. This one was half PPR. So I went Barkley 1. I had the second pick. Dave had the first pick. I went Barkley in the first round. Then there was no running back that I loved. It was Melvin Gordon was like the next running back. So I was like, nope, not taking him in round 2. So I went Juju, then DJ Moore, then Terry McLaurin, then DK Metcalf, and then at the end of round 6, I took Raheem Mostert. But what if it had to be and I don't think anybody has a problem with that, right?
I don't know if Ben does.
Especially not with that build. No, I mean, I actually have Melvin Gordon as one of my busts, and I took him in this draft you're talking about in the 4th round because you said you're thinking about him at the end of round 2. He came all the way around to the 4th. And in a half PPR league, yeah, I'm going to take him as my RB2, just like you made a similar decision with Mostert as your RB2.
Right, and after I had 4 wide receivers. But the question is, no on the 4th round, yes on the 6th round. What about 55th overall, which is where he is on Fantasy Pros right now in PPR? That's RB24. That's 1 spot ahead of Mark Ingram and David Montgomery. What do you think about Mostert there?
The only way I'm taking him there is if those other running backs that you just mentioned, Ingram and Montgomery, are gone, and a lot of other running backs are gone, and I got receiver heavy in my earlier picks, and I'm just desperate for a running back.
Yeah, I basically agree with Dave. I don't think I would take him in the 5th. Even if I was receiver heavy, I probably would find a receiver I like way too much more than diving into Mostert for need at that point even.
Before I forget, we have your Apple Podcast questions and your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com set to be read on today's show. So stay tuned for that. And Dave, who's your biggest bust?
Well, if Benjamin Gretsch is going to take shots at me, I'm going to take him right back at him and say Will Fuller is a big-time bust for me, to the point where I really just don't want to draft him at all. 2 things you need to be a good receiver in the NFL are steady hands and availability. And Will Fuller's had a hard time displaying both of those things on a regular basis. I know the opportunity is there for him with DeAndre Hopkins gone. Lots of target share to be grabbed in Houston. But they brought in Brandon Cooks. They brought in Randall Cobb for whatever those guys are worth. I think Will Fuller stays exactly in the role he's in, which is very, very inconsistent, high upside, terrible downside. And he's probably going to get banged up at some point after he drops a pass and trips over his feet and ends up being on your bench for 4 weeks. And I just don't want the hassle of Will Fuller. We talk about him breaking out every year. I decided very early this offseason that I wasn't going to have any of Will Fuller. I love his quarterback. Don't love him.
Does this matter to you? He's been in the league 4 years. Cooks has been in the league 5 years, I believe. If you take away both Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, you take away both of their rookie seasons. And the reason I did this was because Will Fuller's rookie season was with Brock Osweiler. It was that horrible year for DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm not going to hold it against Will Fuller. If you take away both Cooks and Fuller's rookie seasons, Fuller actually has a slightly higher yards per target than Brandon Cooks. I don't know if that matters to you guys.
Does it matter?
It matters a little bit. Yards per target's going to be depth sensitive, and Fuller gets downfield looks. But Fuller can do more at different areas of the field than people realize. I mean, I kind of want to give the pro case because I don't know how much we've dug into him. But the 2 things that I love about Fuller's profile this year, one, he's the only receiver left in Houston that actually has a track record with Deshaun Watson. We know that the offseason work is going to be shortened. The Will Fuller to Brandon Cooks debate, you can pretty easily give Fuller the nod in the sense that he's been very productive with Watson before. Remember the splits last offseason where we talked about how much better Watson was when Fuller was on the field? He's a player that dramatically impacts Watson's ability, and they play well together. And then 2, I would just say that I don't think people realize how good he is. And Adam, you just noted the efficiency. He's always kind of attacking him by comparing him to sneaky good players like Kenny Stills, who's always had sneaky good efficiency. But you can go all the way back to his prospect days, and he's been hurt a lot. So there's a question: how good is this guy? A lot of people think he's just a couple big games, and that's all he's been. As a prospect, was very, very good, and basically got Deshaun Kaiser drafted in very high and got him a starting job at the NFL level.
That may be correct. Yes.
He caught 14 touchdowns and 15 touchdowns in his 2 seasons as a full-time player for Notre Dame, and then declared early like we hope to see. And he's been an efficient and productive player at the NFL level since coming in. to me, this is the profile of a guy that as soon as he does stay healthy for a full 16 games, we're going to see a big season. And there's no question in my mind that he could be the number one for them right now. He's the only guy on their team that has any kind of a rapport with Watson.
It would be something completely different than he's done at any point in his 4-year career. As a rookie, he had 3 of 14 games with 15 or more PPR points. Second year, 3 of 10. Third year, 3 of 7. That was the year when he got off to a real hot start. It was 2018. Got off to a hot start and then got hurt. Only played 7 games. And then last year, played 11 games. That's a lot for him. Only 2 games with 15-plus in PPR. So in his career, he's hit that 15-point mark 26% of the time. I can't take a receiver like that with a decent pick, knowing that his success rate just is not very high, and his injury rate, for however you want to measure that, is pretty high. So you can have him, Ben.
The inconsistency is definitely there for Fuller. I mean, remember, he had like 200-something yards and 3 touchdowns. He had all 3 of his touchdowns in one game against the Chiefs. But
he's good for best ball. He's going to win you a week in best ball.
I'm curious to see what he does with 30% of the targets. DeAndre Hopkins was like a 30% target share every year.
Yeah, but he's not getting 30%.
No, he's not. But
Ben will tell you that.
It frees up a lot. Oh, no. I'm not saying he's going to get 30%. It frees up so many targets. All right, we'll see what happens. So Dave's obviously taking Cooks over Fuller. How about you, Ben?
Oh, Fuller for me. Yeah, the concussions scare me with Cooks as well.
Okay.
I don't love taking either one of them.
If Cooks doesn't get concussed and he plays 16 games, he's going to beat ADP. There's no question.
Are you taking either one of them by the end of round 6?
No, well, you don't have to. I don't think they go there.
I'm saying, like, do you like Fuller enough that where you're going to, really, get up there and try and get him?
I did that in the Twitch mock the other night, and you guys had a little bit of a field day with it on the show. The reason I did that is I started running back, tight end, wide receiver, running back, which is a pretty wide receiver thin start for me. And then in the 5th, I took a receiver. In the 6th and the 7th, I knew I was going receiver. I was certain of it. And so I went with my highest ranked receiver in the 6th round, and it was Will Fuller. And I'm pretty high on him, and I'm comfortable with that over drafting a guy when whoever falls to you in the next round is just going to be another receiver. And it was Deebo, actually. And then I ended up getting Christian Kirk in the 8th on top of it. All those guys were in the same tier for me. I have no problem with reaching in that type of a scenario where you're locked into multiple players at a position. Take the best guy on your board.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just think you've got the wrong best guy.
More busts later on in the show. We'll get to it. Let me promote a few things here. Next week, we got 5 episodes, including a mailbag, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com, and all of your Apple Podcast questions as well. Please leave us a nice 5-star review and ask a question. We got poker Tuesday night on Twitch. So that's going to be awesome. Twitch.com/FF today. Playing poker on Tuesday night. I plan on doing really well. And next week, I didn't mention the content that we're going to have other than the mailbag. We are debating the top 5 at every position. So that's going to be a really fun debate for the quarterbacks and the running backs in particular. But really for the wide receivers, I'm looking forward to that episode because I feel like we haven't gotten into that one as much. Julio versus Tyreek versus Godwin versus whoever's in your top 5. So we'll take a look at the consensus rankings. We'll have some debates about it, and that's coming up next week. News and notes. Well, I don't know that we have to react about this, but you probably saw the quote. Dr. Fauci said, quote, unless players are essentially in a bubble, insulated from the community, and they are treated and they are tested nearly every day, it would be very hard to see how football is able to be played this fall. If there is a second wave, which is certainly a possibility and which would be complicated by the predictable flu season, football may not happen this year, end quote. Meanwhile, Ed Werder from ESPN reported that 3 coaches expressed concerns about the virus, one of them saying maybe push the season back. I think one of them brought up not playing 16 games. It's an uncertain time right now. I think people are probably spooked by the positive tests. Now we got one in Denver. We had Houston and the Cowboys.
And I don't know if Sean McVay is one of those coaches, but just before we came on, I saw a Rams reporter mentioning that he had also commented on it and said, something about that it would be tough to play football. He's like, we're supposed to be social distancing, but we're going to play football, and it's a contact game.
I think it's a good idea if you're a league commissioner to start thinking about how you want to move forward with the the uncertain times and what might happen. We talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago today, where you expand a roster spot. Maybe you're entitled to the backup quarterback for a team. If you've got Mahomes, you automatically have Henny. Something like that. Maybe use team quarterbacks, and then you can just avoid the whole rigmarole with that position. But they're if they play this year, and I'm still optimistic that they will, guys. But if they play, I'm worried that there will be people ruled out because they tested positive day of game. And if it happens on a Monday, when you can't really replace somebody, you're going to need some help. And I think it's only fair if a commissioner runs that past the rest of the people in their league. If a guy's out, this owner has carte blanche to go to the waiver wire and pick up somebody else from this game to replace them, something like that.
And the NFL is considering expanding practice squads to up to 16 players. Practice squads had been 10. New agreement has it up to 12 now, and it potentially up to 16 players according to NFL Network.
Good.
Good. There's 22 positions on the field. I mean, you're going to need at least one backup at every position.
That'll be popular with the NFL Players Association. So that'll get done.
Justin Jefferson is going to play a lot in the slot. Not a big surprise, I guess.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
Too. We also got this email from Neil. From Clearwater Beach. Email of the day, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. So many mixed news out there on how it works and how many games. Okay, this is about holdouts. Sorry, I forgot to read the subject line. He wanted to know about the new holdout rules. Last I read, players can report, then hold out 5 games in a season and get credit for the season. Anyhow, this rule change deserves clarity for all fantasy players. So I actually asked Will Brinson about it. I don't know if you guys know.
I'm on it. Yeah, I asked Joel Corey, who's a former NFL agent who does a lot of contractual analysis for CBS Sports. Yeah. So it's true that if a player holds out for 5 days, it impacts his status for free agency the following year. His contract tolls. So if Dalvin Cook holds out for the first 5 days of training camp, he's going to be a restricted free agent next spring. You got me so far?
He'll accrue
just 5 days of training camp, because this says 5
That's
games.
5. It used to be 30 days. I meant 5 days of training camp, not 5 games.
Interesting.
Yeah,
no, the email said 5 games.
Right. No, it's 5 days of training camp.
Okay.
0 games. So that's going to be something that Dalvin, it'll hurt his leverage for sure.
Hold on for 1 second, though, because Brinson said to me, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon have to show up for training camp on the day their teams are scheduled to report, or they don't get credit for an accrued season. To get credit for an accrued season, they also have to be on, quote, full pay status, end quote, for at least 6 regular season games. There is also a clause saying a player can lose a season for failing to perform his contracted services for a material period of time, which Will thinks is intentionally vague to give teams a loophole if someone shows up for day 1 and then goes rogue. So I'm still a little bit confused.
That's interesting.
What I understood was that this was designed to eliminate holdouts.
Yeah. Well, either one is bad news for Dalvin Cook. Like, where's his leverage now to say, well, I'm going to stay away from the team? The team's going to say, okay, great. Go ahead. Stay away. We're going to keep you for 2021, man. Come on back when you're ready. And the other thing that I know, there's the fines. There's an issue with fines. If you're on your rookie deal, the fines you accrue from being a holdout can be forgiven. If you're on your second deal or past that and you're fined, those fines stand no matter what. Team can't take it away. So Dalvin at least won't get fined if he holds out and then he comes back. But I mean, I guess the gamble he's taking is that if he holds out, he's assuming he's going to sign a new deal anyway. And that would it wouldn't matter what his status for next spring would be, because he'd already be under a new contract with the Vikings. And then he said something like, well, I wouldn't mind getting paid $13 million a year guaranteed. Yeah, I bet he wouldn't.
Yeah,
make him, the second or third highest paid running back per year in the NFL. And I don't know if Minnesota's going there.
Well, let's do a few more busts here. And Ben, let's start with Aaron Jones, 17th overall on Fantasy Pros. That makes him RB11. He's basically got the same ADP as Nick Chubb. He's slightly ahead of Miles Sanders. I know you'd prefer Miles Sanders. He's also after Eckler and Drake. Maybe I think he's after Eckler. Yeah, he's after Eckler and Drake. But Aaron Jones, anyway, where would you feel comfortable taking Aaron Jones? Why is he a bust for you right now?
He's a bust because of, we've talked about it all offseason, but there's even more than just the surface level that we talk about. We talk about the 19 touchdowns. We talk about they drafted A.J. Dillon, and he's so clearly going to play on he's the size and speed of Derrick Henry. He's so clearly going to play in short yardage situations, so that immediately impacts Aaron Jones' scoring potential. Jones does have game-breaking ability and should score from longer distances at a higher rate than potentially any other running back in the league. He's a very good player. I don't dislike him at all. But then there's the other side where the only time even last year he was over, I believe it's 60 or 65% snap rates. His four highest snap rates of the year were the 2 games that Jamal Williams missed and the other 2 that he left early. So he was already kind of just a committee back last year who did better because Williams was getting banged up. And then also we've talked about how his receiving was dramatically impacted by Devontae Adams missing time. And he saw a lot more targets and a lot more even downfield looks. They were splitting him out in those games. I know he had a huge game against Kansas City receiving. All of that came when Devontae Adams was banged up. So you have this whole confluence of factors last year that led to him having this breakout season. He's very, very talented, but it's not even necessarily the way the Packers wanted to use him last year. And now they go and they draft A.J. Dillon, and he's going to steal all those touchdowns and everything. I mean, for me, love the talent. Can't draft him anywhere close to this. I mean, just I don't know. End of the third, beginning of the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that puts him in the Chris Carson, Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley range.
Yeah, I have him ahead of those guys in my rankings, but that's not by much. I'm 2 spots ahead of Gurley, 3 ahead of Gordon.
I feel like there's really a huge, obvious tier in running back.
I was about to get into that.
Right? You got
it's after I feel like it's after maybe the 12th or 13th running back in PPR, and probably the same spot in non-PPR. It kind of depends on how you feel about Jacobs in full PPR and whether or not he belongs ahead or behind.
It depends on how you feel about Aaron Jones too. He's
Yep.
But I feel like he's to steal a term from Jamie, the bridge. He's the running back that will get you from that. It's basically the second tier of near elite running backs to the very good tier.
Well, is he? Which one is he in?
He's in the very good tier, but he's at the top of the very good tier. I can't put Chris Carson ahead of him yet. I can't put Melvin Gordon ahead of him. Not going to put Todd Gurley ahead of him.
You should just not draft running backs at that point. I mean, that's going to be my whole argument with him and with Melvin Gordon and Mostert that I already said earlier. Go to a different position at that point. Don't.
But there's a difference,
if you can.
I think, with Aaron Jones compared to Gordon. Like, Aaron Jones is so good. And what was the stat I gave? He's had 11 games with 15 or more carries, and he has scored 14 or more non-PPR points. Non-PPR. In every single game.
Mm-hmm.
If they would just give him the work, he would.
But they're not going to. You can't ignore what they're telling you. They didn't last year when Jamal Williams was healthy. They didn't last year.
But they're also telling us that they're going to run the ball more than they did last year. That possibly. Like, do you think that? They honestly, like, they feel like they could be one of those teams that's top 5 in rush attempts. I think they were like 13th last year. You know?
But they drafted an absolute workhorse between the tackles grinder in the second round, no less.
Why would they go away from Aaron Jones?
I think the only way you can make a case.
You always bring up Derrick Henry. I always bring up DeMarco Murray because Derrick Henry got almost no work in his rookie year behind DeMarco Murray.
Yes, but Murray wasn't already entrenched in that role and giving up touches to a third back before Henry was drafted. That's my issue, is they weren't giving him a full workload when Jamal Williams was healthy last year. They weren't playing him on passing downs as much as Williams. They've always liked Williams as a pass blocker more. And then they go draft this guy who was a between the tackles, big, bruising type of grinder back. Of course they're going to tell you they're going to run more because they just drafted a second-round running back. But I think the only way you can really make a case for Jones, as much as I love how good he is, but for his role being big enough where he can consistently get 15 carries, like you said, is to kind of just say that A.J. Dillon's not going to do anything.
No, he's not going to get consistently 15 carries. I was just saying if he does, if you're going to tell me that he was a workhorse feature back, he's a first-round pick probably for everyone.
Yep.
But I don't think that. But I don't know that he gets fewer touches because Jamal Williams had 107 carries last year. Jones had 236. I wish it hadn't been dependent on Jamal Williams getting hurt, I guess. But
do you have the receiving numbers? Who have more targets?
Probably Jones, but there were 4 games that Williams missed, so
right.
There's that. But you're right about the catches with Devontae Adams. 12 games with Adams, he had 27 catches. 4 games without Adams, he had 22 catches. And all right, let's move on. Let's get to one.
I mean, listen, it drives me nuts how they use him too. I'm with you.
Yeah.
But I think they're doing it because they're trying to keep him upright and on the field because they know he's got a history of knee injuries. And I think the Dillon pick was one of those, let's stay a year ahead of things for Gutekunst and the rest of the front office in Green Bay. They know that Aaron Jones is going to be a free agent after this year. I think Jamal Williams, I don't think it's this year. I think it's next year. No, they were drafted together, weren't they? I don't remember, but either this year or next year, Jamal Williams is going to be a free agent too. So one of those guys is probably going to walk. And Dillon is someone, he had to have reminded LaFleur of Derrick Henry. And LaFleur was there when Derrick Henry was there in Tennessee. And he was the offensive coordinator when Henry finally started to break out. So I'm positive that that's part of it too, is that they're trying to stay a step ahead. And for this year, it's an embarrassment of riches. It's going to hurt fantasy managers. I'm not comfortable taking Aaron Jones unless it's round 3 at the earliest. And someone's probably going to take him before then, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so you know what? Why don't we group together a whole bunch of players here? They're all going in similar ranges. Ben has Melvin Gordon listed as a bust. He's 34th overall on Fantasy Pros. He's RB17. Just ahead of Le'Veon Bell, who's one of Dave's busts. He's RB18. And David Johnson as well, who is RB20. I might have the orders a little bit mixed up, but it doesn't really. I think David Johnson's 47th overall. I wrote down that he was 37th overall. But it goes Melvin Gordon, then Le'Veon Bell, then David Johnson. They're all going before James Conner, for example, going before some of the rookies. But, this group of running backs, veterans, I'll let you guys explain it. But this is something that I've really bought into, Ben, since you started hammering it home. I want to give Dave the first words. I haven't really gotten him as involved. But
no, it's fine.
It's part of that running back dead. Those like aging running backs that like be ahead of the curve as a fantasy owner and don't put too much stock into them, right? Is that sort of the gist?
Yeah, I think the line that I used was don't overpay for past production at running back. Like that's my motto at running back.
Right.
Don't pay for the premium brand, pay for the discount brand that hasn't, broken out yet,
All right, so let's talk about these guys. Melvin Gordon, Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson. Dave, your overall thoughts there? Maybe they're not, but maybe they're not all busts. What do you think?
I'm okay with Melvin. I don't think he's as. I don't think I get the rationale for why he's a bust because he's older and changing teams, and he wasn't exactly a crusher last year when he came back from his holdout with the Chargers. But I think that he's what the Broncos really want at running back under Pat Shermer. I think they want a running back who can do 3-down work. And I don't think Philip Lindsay was that guy because he was terrible in passing situations. And I don't think Royce Freeman was that guy because he wasn't that good specifically in rushing situations. And they had the opportunity to upgrade there. And they did it with Gordon. And it's not to say that Lindsay won't play, but I bet Lindsay gets right around 10 touches per game. Melvin gets everything else, including 3rd-down work. And I think that it's a good offense for him to be in. It's a positive fit in terms of goal line work, pass catching work. He's done a lot of that before. I'm not saying that Melvin Gordon's about to embark on a great 3 or 4 year run with the Broncos, but in redraft, I think he can give you one good year where he can finish as a top 15 fantasy running back. So that's the argument for Melvin Gordon. For Le'Veon and David Johnson, it's a whole lot of what Ben said, which is you're paying for past production. Except you're really not paying for Le'Veon's last 2 years. You're just expecting him to somehow magically come back to the form that he was in when he was with the Steelers. He saw a career low in touches with Adam Gase last year. I think it was 20.7 per game. In PPR leagues, I guess there's some redeemable value because he can catch 4 or 5 passes per game. Gase hasn't had a top 12 running back since 2016, and he's been coaching and calling plays for offenses every single year since then. The offensive line's improved, but I don't know if it's going to be improved to the point where Le'Veon's going to get 4 yards per carry. He was around 3.2. He was terrible in the red zone, and he's 28 years old. So I'm almost at the point where I'm going to sink him in my rankings behind the rookies, which maybe 2 weeks ago I thought I'd be crazy to do that. But I'm so down on him that I don't want to have him on my team, that I'd rather go get a rookie running back. Or more importantly, this is where, remember how earlier in the podcast, Ben referred to the point where Chris Carson and Gurley and Aaron Jones, that tier, the very good tier that we talked about, and that Jones was the bridge between the two of them, where he said, that's where I want to go and get somebody at a different position. Where you're going to see Le'Veon go and David Johnson go, that's where I want to get a wide receiver. And that's in that round 4, round 5 range. I don't want to get a running back in that range if I can help it. And if I do, it's probably going to be a rookie, and I'm not going to love it for the first few weeks of the season.
I agree with all that. I mean, I loved it.
Let me just say, here's kind of why Aaron Jones is so interesting, especially if you have an early pick in the first round. You start with one of those top 5 running backs. He might be your only chance to get a running back, Aaron Jones, until you reach this tier of running backs.
True.
Nobody.
Same thing with Melvin.
So that's why he's a bit of a conundrum. And he's obviously, like, I think we all like Aaron Jones better than Melvin Gordon and Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson, etc. But, this is exactly what I did. That's why I ended up with Raheem Mostert as my number 2 running back, because Aaron Jones is actually off the board, 23rd overall, or I would have taken him. Maybe you guys wouldn't have. I would have. But he was off the board. So that's why I had to make a real commitment to say, nope, no running backs now. Not interested. I already had Barkley. I went with 4 straight wide receivers. But you know what I'm saying, Ben? It's like,
yes,
there are so many running backs that we're just sort of like labeling as busts that it's a little bit difficult, I think, for fantasy managers to hear that and say, well, how am I going to get 2 running backs?
Right. Where are my running backs going to come from? So there's two sides to that. One, I agree with you that Aaron Jones probably is that last one that you can feel comfortable with. Although Dave's right about Gordon. Gordon's going to play on passing downs. And I listed him as a bust here mostly because we talk about the same bust on every show. And I like when we talk about guys that we don't like, and I've harped on a lot of other guys. And I realized I don't really love Gordon. And then I ended up taking him, like I said, in today's mock in the 4th round. It was a 0.5 PPR draft. That's going to change things a little bit, right? And I started Michael Thomas, Travis Kelce. I was chasing running backs at that point, and I was comfortable taking Gordon at that point. And I've been a big fan of his for a long time, but 27-year-old back, never been a particularly efficient runner, joining a crowded backfield, an offense that's going to throw to backs at a lower clip, an offense that's going to generate fewer scoring chances. None of those things are good, right? And there's similar negative trends with Aaron Jones. So the second thing I would say is how big of a difference is it between those guys and, like, for instance, in Gordon's case, Phillip Lindsay, who's still going to have a role, Kerryon Johnson, Damian Williams. This year, we're actually in this weird spot where we're not real confident in all these rookies that were drafted high, because there was a lot of rookies drafted high, but also no one wants to draft their backfield mates at all. But those guys are going to produce fantasy points. Maybe they produce 8 to 10 a week. And my point is, don't chase somebody into the 3rd or the 4th round that you think is only going to produce maybe 14 or 12 points a week, when you can get a guy for 8 to 10 points a week later. And the difference at wide receiver, the difference at tight end is way bigger in that gap. So I think the clear answer for me is, again, the running back dead zone. You have to be thin at running back early in drafts. You got to get really good at other positions. And there are options later that will get you points at running back. So don't take a guy that you don't think can be a 20-point-per-game scorer if he's only going to give you a 2 or 3 point per week advantage over somebody you could get in the 10th round.
And Dave, this is a different conversation in non-PPR, right?
Well, I mean, I like Le'Veon even less in non-PPR.
Okay, but specifically this running back conversation. Like, I don't think I can go 1 running back, 4 wide receivers in a non-PPR league. I'm even
and you shouldn't.
PPR league, but full PPR.
Yeah,
if
you
you're playing in a full PPR league with 3 wide receivers and a flex, yeah, you can be totally fine with a running back in the 1st round and then nothing until the 6th round. It's perfectly viable.
Sure.
But non-PPR, I'm not sure. What about half PPR?
Half
PPR, you're looking at.
You could probably get away with it in half PPR.
You're looking at David Johnson and AJ Green. Where are you going?
Probably Johnson, because I'm souring on Green too. But I mean, we haven't really even talked about David Johnson. At least Johnson's in a system that has produced decent running backs. I mean, Chris Towers, who's a huge fan of David Johnson, has said last year Carlos Hyde had over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns in Houston. So what's stopping David Johnson from doing that? And my thought is, well, if they don't use David Johnson the right way, and if David Johnson gets hurt again, that will stop him from being that guy. They don't. The track record for Deshaun has been not to throw to his running backs. His check down is throwing deep, and now he's got more receivers to throw deep to than he's had previously. Good downfield receivers, I should say. And I think the only thing that helps David Johnson now compared to where he was in Arizona last year is that he's got a better offensive line, but it's not necessarily a better offense. And it's one that may not be tailored to his strengths. And he's an old man too. Old being a relative term. I'm in my 40s, and David Johnson's like late 20s. So plus he'd beat me up if he heard me say that, and I don't want to get beat up. But I wouldn't take him in that 40 to 50th overall range. I think he should go past that. And I think he should be one of those running backs that you look and you go, all right, I need a running back. I'll just take David Johnson. Very few people outside of Chris Towers are excited to draft David Johnson this year.
Yeah. And there has not been a running back under Bill O'Brien that has had more than 44 catches on Houston.
Yeah, they've averaged 54 catches a year. All the running backs in Houston since Deshaun got there. And Duke is still there.
So again, that could help. Yeah, and Duke is
by how many, Adam? You're going to, okay, fine. Let's say it goes up by 50%. If there's 70 catches to go around between Duke Johnson and David Johnson, who's getting? David might get the most, but it might be 40 to 35.
Well, all right, fine. But then if you look at what Hyde and Lamar Miller have done, and then you say David Johnson could get 30 to 35 catches, he's probably getting 240 carries. So now you're talking about 270 touches.
If he plays
David
16.
Johnson. Yeah. How appealing is that?
I guess I'll take David Johnson on draft.
The key for me for Johnson, and I haven't been taking him either, and again, I agree with all of what Dave just said, but it will be whether he splits out wide. I think we'll know week one. Like if I draft him anywhere, I'll know week one if I want to trade him. Because if they're not splitting him out, then that's a problem. He's been very good split out wide throughout his career. And in the slot, he's essentially like a tight end. Like he has those skills. He's a good route runner down the field. And that's part of why he had such a monster receiving line back in 2016 in his huge year. And that line featured a bunch of air yards, which is something you don't see from running backs. It was the most air yards for a running back in any season. This was at least true a couple of years ago, right after he did it. It was the most he had since air yards had started being tracked. And by a lot, like hundreds more than any other running back that year. So he was a guy that could actually get down the field. If they're going to use him like that in the absence of Hopkins, which you brought up, then maybe there's a chance for him to get a lot more running back receptions. Because Dave's right, that the trend is real, but if David Johnson's not playing running back, it could be different.
They gave up a third-round pick for Duke Johnson last year. Did they use Duke Johnson that way when Duke was known the world over as passing down specialist? They were like, all right, let's give that guy 3 catches per game. I want to put the cherry on top of this Sunday, if I may, Adam, because I love fattening food.
Yeah. Oh man, my birthday is tomorrow. I'm gonna.
Oh.
Happy birthday.
Some Patsies.
Ben's is next week. No, Anthony's coal fire for me. So.
Good. They have that near you in New York, or are you getting that shipped, or are you coming down here and not telling anybody? What's up?
It's like 15 minutes away from me.
Okay. All right. That's good. The cherry on top. David Johnson's schedule: week 1 at Kansas City, week 2 Baltimore, week 3 at Pittsburgh, week 4 Minnesota.
Bad.
I don't know if that's exactly their first 4 games. I know Kansas City's first, but those are some of the teams they play very early on. And then Le'Veon, his schedule is really bad too. For some reason, I can't find it in my stupid spreadsheet.
Patriots are week 2. I don't know.
He's got the Bills and the 49ers.
Okay.
Right off the top.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We got 2 more players to talk about, Odell Beckham and Devontae Parker. Who's got those guys as a bust? Then we'll run through Heath's list, which includes the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, at least in ADP, and last year, Lamar Jackson. All right, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today to wrap this up. You don't have to ask me that.
Why?
You know what I'm getting.
The meatballs and ricotta and sweet peppers?
Hell yeah. No sweet peppers, just meatballs and ricotta.
Peppers make it.
Best.
Peppers are good.
The meatballs, man. It is
meatballs are so good.
Unbelievable slice of pizza. And I'm going to have like 5 of them. And I'm going to have some wings, too. They have great wings.
Yes, very good wings.
I'm
Oven
getting a
grilled.
cookie cake.
Now I'm
When
hungry.
was the last time you guys had cookie cake?
Oh,
Oh,
we
good.
made homemade cookies this week. It wasn't cookie cake, but they were damn good.
You just make it in one big square. Bam, it's a cookie cake. All right.
Mhm.
All right, so Devontae Parker is one of Ben's busts. He's going 58th overall. He's wide receiver 26, just after DJ Chark and Stephon Diggs. I want to say he was like the number 3 wide receiver in the last 8 games of the year, something crazy like that. Ben, you're saying no on Devontae Parker.
Yeah, and we've talked about him a lot this offseason. I think wide receiver 26 is a little bit closer to reasonable. I've seen him go quite a bit higher than that at times this offseason. But I actually have him in my 30s and actually well into my 30s at 35, but in a big tier that starts around wide receiver 26 and goes all the way to wide receiver 40. I'm concerned about Preston Williams coming back. They were essentially identical in efficiency before Williams got hurt, and obviously Josh Rosen was playing a lot during that time. I'm concerned about the fact that I think Mike Gesicki could have a big breakout. I'm also concerned about the Dolphins adding 2 running backs in Jordan Howard and Matt Breida that I think will give them more balance on offense, and they won't be such a pass-happy team as they were down the stretch last year. I mean, basically, Devontae Parker's season last year can be split into 2 halves. The first half was very similar to his career numbers, which aren't fantastic, and the second half he was pretty much all world. His yards per target was over 11. His touchdown rate was very high. And look, Devontae Parker's very good, but he's also had a hard time staying healthy all throughout his career. He's not somebody that I can trust as a stable wide receiver 2 or even high-end wide receiver 3, which I guess is where he's going here. He's more of a back-end wide receiver 3/flex for me.
He was able to stay healthy. We all knew that he had good talent. He was a first-round pick, and Ryan Fitzpatrick just kept chucking it to him. And so if all those things stay true, then he can be fine. He can finish inside the top 24 and maybe even the top 15 at wide receiver. But I feel like it's asking a lot.
Yeah, you haven't even mentioned Tua, the possibility that
Right.
Tua locked on to receivers a little bit at Alabama.
Right, but he's not going to be as prolific as Fitzpatrick. I wouldn't think.
Shouldn't be, especially. I mean, listen, if Fitzpatrick can gun it like he did last year behind that offensive line, then I guess anything's possible in Miami because that line will be better.
I'm looking at this draft we did today, industry draft. 3 wide receivers. How would you rank them? Cortland Sutton, Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry.
That order.
I believe I have it Sutton, Landry, Parker. Or I might have
Landry
Landry ahead of Sutton, but I'm pretty confident I have Parker last.
In those last 8 games for Devontae Parker, the Dolphins were on pace for the second most pass attempts in the NFL. I don't know if they had the second most in those 8 games.
Right. Yeah, they couldn't run.
And you multiply by 2, they would have finished second passing.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was really just a great combination of suckiness that led to Devontae Parker being a star.
Odell Beckham, Dave, you have him as a bust. One of your bold predictions, he's going to be even worse than he was last year.
Yeah.
That's a bold prediction because he was 31st in non-PPR, 25th in PPR last year. Still had 1,000 yards and only 4 touchdowns. Why is he a bust? And I'll give you his ADP. It is 33rd overall.
Round 3 too soon.
The board.
Yeah. I think the offense is going conservative. I think that's what Kevin Stefanski's addition of but fixing the offensive line they had to do anyway. But adding Hooper told me, all right, the Browns are going to try and use more tight end friendly formations and plays to maybe on one hand free up what's going on with his receivers, but on the other hand, make use of these other guys that they have, particularly the running backs. I think they're going to try and run the ball like crazy. That's why they got Conklin and why they addressed it in the draft. And they've got one of the better offensive lines in the league now. And it'd be silly to say, all right, Baker, just go chuck it. Go pull your own Ryan Fitz magic act. And I don't think that's going to happen very often. And Odell is still going to garner very tough coverage. I don't think that there's anybody else on that offense that's going to force defensive coordinators to say, all right, we better just keep the safeties deep and we'll just try and bend and not break and give up a bunch of field goals. I think you're still going to see safeties over the top of Odell because coordinators aren't going to be afraid of less than 100% Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper. I think his touchdowns are in real danger of being right about where they were last year because of Hooper, who was a red zone threat for the Falcons. He's going to do that for the Browns. And because I think they're going to be able to run the ball in the red zone really well. Because when Chubb's tired, here's Kareem Hunt. And Hunt can catch passes out of the backfield too. So if we're relying on Odell Beckham to make big plays, he's made his fair share over the last 3 years, but not as many as he did in his first 3 years. And the words of Ben Gretsch are ringing in my head. Don't draft for past performance. And I think people are still going to do that with Odell Beckham. I can't do it, given his injury history and given what I think this Browns offense is going to look like.
And can I tell you who else is a red zone threat? Jarvis Landry. It's amazing he doesn't have more touchdowns. Here are his red zone targets in 6 seasons. And I would say, yeah, like 13 his rookie year. That's good. Anything more than that's pretty damn good. 13, 22, 9, 21, 18, and 20. And in 3 of his 6 seasons, he's been 3rd in the NFL in targets inside the 10-yard line, including last year when he had 11. So it's weird that Landry doesn't score more touchdowns because he's always getting targets inside the 20 and inside the 10-yard line. And last year, he had twice as many of each as Odell Beckham did. All right.
Maybe part of that was because Beckham was hurt, but he's been hurt each of the last 3 seasons.
He likes to get hurt, that Odell Beckham.
Well, I don't think he likes it. I don't think anybody likes it.
Let's run through Heath's, and you guys can just tell me agree or disagree. So Lamar Jackson, 15th overall on NFC, 21st overall on Fantasy Pros. Is he a bust if he's going in the first 2 rounds?
He's an ADP bust, but I don't think he's going to be a terrible fantasy pick.
And I don't think anyone does. I don't think Heath does.
Right. Heath would just prefer to get him in round 3.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to get anybody that you can get in round 3 and round 4, you know?
How's that a bust if he's going, like, don't you have to be pretty bad to be a bust?
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I don't know, Heath. All right, how about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 19th overall on NFC, 28th overall on Fantasy Pros in PPR, but 41st overall on Fantasy Pros in non-PPR.
I think if you're a cautious drafter, you won't get Edwards-Helaire because you'll say there's no reason why he should be going this high when, he's splitting duties. He hasn't won anything yet. We're assuming that he's going to be amazing based on some good facts, like running backs under Andy Reid have a good track record, but he's got to win the job, and then they've got to give him all that work. And is that going to happen in September, or is that going to happen closer to Halloween?
But again, we can't forget what teams do. They took him in the first round. They made him the first drafted running back. They obviously love him. They're not going to not use him. I agree with Dave. You have to pay quite the price to get him, but I'm going to make sure I have exposure to him this year. He could be great for fantasy.
It's like if you draft Lamar Jackson in the first round, you're drafting him close to his ceiling. And I think if you draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire anywhere in the first 2 rounds, you're drafting him pretty close to his ceiling, unless he just mops up in training camp and just looks like an absolute stud, in which case round 2 is going to be too late.
Yeah, we've had rookie running backs year after year. Last year was an exception because Josh Jacobs didn't catch a lot of passes. Miles Sanders was a late bloomer. They didn't finish in the top 12. But each of the 4 previous years, you had a great year from Gurley, a great year from Zeke, a pretty good year from Fournette and McCaffrey, a great year from Barkley. I mean, 4 of those.
Kamara should be in there too.
Kamara, yes, and Kareem Hunt.
Yep.
Also, we're talking like 4 or 5 top 5 running backs.
And I don't think you can discount what Sanders or even Jacobs did, but especially Sanders. He came on late. It's very similar to Kamara. Wasn't amazing from week 1 that year. Those guys helped you win leagues.
No, but Kamara did finish in the top 5. Sanders didn't finish quite in the top 12. But yeah, you're right. Rookie running backs have impact. That's a noteworthy trend. The last one is Jonathan Taylor for Heath as a bust. I think 31st overall is crazy. That's where he's going on NFC. 52nd overall on Fantasy Pros and PPR.
Do you remember when Zeke was going to like 6 overall?
What, as a rookie?
I thought it was a little wild.
As a rookie, he was a first rounder.
I remember liking
him Barkley.
As a first rounder. Same mistake. I did too. I liked him as a first rounder. Yeah.
So
if Marlon Mack was out of the picture and Nyheim Hines was not quite as good as he's been and not as locked into this role on passing downs, then yeah, Taylor could be going ahead of Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I'm just saying you compare those guys were both top 10 picks to Taylor going 30, and it's not so crazy because Taylor is that type of talent. Frankly, he's that good of an athlete and that good of a prospect.
He has to hold on to the football, and he's got to prove that he can be a good receiver out of the backfield.
You think Taylor compares to Barkley and Zeke?
Zeke, certainly. Barkley is maybe a notch ahead. Zeke, physically, they're very, very similar. Size and speed and 40 time, they're very similar.
Zeke was more versatile coming out. Barkley obviously was.
Zeke had the pass.
I think he's behind them, but closer to Zeke than Barkley. Barkley is special.
I was surprised that he wasn't the first running back off the board. I really was. He wasn't the second either. All right, Apple.
Just imagine how crazy we'd be going if Jonathan Taylor had gone to Kansas City.
One thing
behind an elite O-line, I'm still going pretty crazy.
Yeah, he's gotta make Marlon Mack disappear.
Yeah.
And I don't think their schedule's easy in the beginning of the year. At least it looks easy on paper. Mack could get off to a decent start, and it limits what Taylor can do. And I think Hines. I think when it's third down in the 2-minute drill, it's going to be Hines on the field.
Yeah, we never really talk about how Damian Williams can never stay healthy. I think that's
he only stays healthy during the playoffs.
Really cannot handle a workload so far in his career. So that's a point for edwards-helaire. Apple Podcast questions from EYIR. My question is, why is there absolutely no debate in the industry about who should go number one? There's only been one time in the last 20 years an RB has repeated as the number one scoring non-quarterback fantasy player. That was LaDainian Tomlinson. This is not true. LaDainian Tomlinson 06-07. I don't think that's true. Maybe it depends on the scoring system, but I will tell you that Todd Gurley in non-PPR was number one in both 2017 and 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Christian McCaffrey was number one in 2018 and 2019 in PPR, although some scoring has Barkley ahead of McCaffrey in 2018, but they were basically tied. So McCaffrey's in PPR has been the number one running back 2 years in a row.
This stat isn't as crazy as you think, though. I think if you look at all 16 games, when you're saying some scoring, it's not including week 17 sometimes. I think if you look at all 16 games full season, I think it is true that it goes back to LaDainian Tomlinson that no running back is repeated.
First of all, I thought LaDainian Tomlinson only had one season where he was the number one running back, so I didn't even know that he repeated. And I'm telling you for a fact in our CBS leagues, based on our CBS scoring, in non-PPR, Gurley repeated in 17 and 18, and McCaffrey was tied, including week 17, where McCaffrey barely played. So on a per-game basis, he was definitely better than Saquon Barkley in 2018, but he tied him in 2018, and then he blew everybody away in 2019. So really, on a per-game basis in PPR, I guarantee you, Christian McCaffrey has been the best running back 2 years in a row.
Sure.
Actually, I almost feel like this is the argument against McCaffrey. Like the only thing you can say that it goes against Christian McCaffrey is, well, running backs never do this. They never go back-to-back as number one overall. I think if I draft McCaffrey number one overall and he ends up as like the second or third best one in PPR, I'll live with myself.
Yeah.
I would say that this is the exact way you shouldn't use long-term trends. I think it's an interesting note. And Adam, you are right. LaDainian Tomlinson in PPR only did it once. I'm pretty sure, at least, because that's something that I pulled when we were doing fantasy football yesterday. I think it maybe goes back to Priest Holmes. But just before Holmes, Falk did it. It's an interesting note, but again, you're making a great point that McCaffrey essentially has done it, but he finished second. Gurley essentially has done it. Tomlinson essentially did it for like 4 or 5 years in a row. He was at least top three. That's not number one, but it's top three. That, like, all of those things there's various reasons why players didn't do it multiple years in a row, but none of them were Christian McCaffrey, who literally in PPR was 150 points clear of any other back last year. He was so much better than anyone else. He is the perfect fantasy back in terms of his receiving workload, his goal line work, his massive snap share. There's no argument for any other player other than going into some long-term trends that you don't think can repeat themselves, but were never actually about a player like Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. Plus, those long-term trends, they don't like support a different candidate, right? It's not like it's okay.
McCaffrey just set the record for receptions by a running back in a season. So you could say that 100% of players who have caught as many passes in a season as him were top two backs back-to-back seasons.
All right, from JW. I know some people are nervous about Cooper Kupp, but isn't it possible they were just trying to lessen the load on Gurley all first half? And once the late season run got there, they felt it was time to start feeding Gurley more. We all know Kupp is Goff's best friend, and I feel the fall off was more about saving Gurley for the end than Kupp suddenly being bad.
Which was a philosophy that I pitched when we were talking about Gurley at this time last year, was that they would just kind of manage his reps until the end of the year when they really needed him, and then they'd give him more. I just didn't think it would come at – I didn't think Kupp's playing time would go away because of it. But I still see Kupp as Goff's best friend, security blanket in the red zone, guy that's going to get a lot of targets in that offense and a lot of touchdowns in that offense. Took him at the 24th overall pick. This is how funny Twitter is to me. I took him 24th overall in this all-star half-point PPR draft that we've referenced already on the pod. Kupp at 24. What a reach. That pick sucks. And then another mention says, Kupp at 24, man, that's great value. He's awesome. He's going to be great this year. So I think the world is kind of torn on Cooper Kupp, but I'm of the belief that he's still going to get a lot of work and still going to score a lot of touchdowns for the Rams.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that when we looked at the slot rates, he was just as good or maybe just a small drop-off when he played outside. And I think we might see more 2 tight end sets from them this year. He might have to play outside a little more without Brandon Cooks. But I do think that they'll use Josh Reynolds outside too and continue to use some 3 wide receiver formations. They're not going to go completely away from that. That's what their whole offense was built on in 2018 in their Super Bowl run. But they did get away from it last year is kind of what I'm referencing when Higbee went bananas at the end of the season. And we'll kind of see how that impacts Kupp. It did impact his snap share a couple of times because when they went to those multiple tight ends, most teams don't use a slot in that scenario. Their slot guy comes off the field. And I know there was a healthy game for Kupp where he only played like 30% of the snaps because they were using so many tight ends. They just basically didn't use him. But then it bounced right back. That was like week 14. It bounced right back to like 60 or 70%, which was fairly normal for him, low. But now that Cooks is gone, he should play in 2 wide sets was the point. He's going to play outside a little bit more. He's going to have to be a little more versatile. But he'll be all right.
Don't be surprised to see Higbee and Gerald Everett line up wide. They did it a bunch last year.
Yeah, that too.
That's McVay looking for a matchup. He wants to put those size speed differentiators out wide to see how teams match up against him on his given play.
From Jack, dear Fry, Bender, Farnsworth, and Zoidberg.
That's Futurama, which I've only watched like twice in my life, but I know it.
And it's really funny, isn't it? You loved it both times.
I didn't, obviously, or else I would have watched it a bunch more times.
It's great. Funny show. I'm starting a dynasty league. I was only able to find 8 players. What is the best lineup composition for an 8-team dynasty league?
2 quarterbacks. 4 running backs. At least 3. I would just jack it up, double everything basically. Not double it, but 2, at least super flex or 2 quarterbacks. I would play at least 3 running backs, at least 4 receivers, maybe a couple of flexes. You could do 2 tight ends. You could do 1 tight end. I would just. We've talked about this on the future of fantasy concepts, and we were talking about ways that we could change the game. Deeper lineups are more fun anyway, so I would just make it a lot deeper at every position.
2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex spots, 2 all.
That's all you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Seems too short. 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flexes?
Yeah.
No.
You want to go an extra flex?
3 running backs for 8 teams is 24 running backs, which is the same as 2 for 12 teams.
Yeah.
3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, 1 tight end, 4 flexes. Bam. We are out of here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a lovely evening. Enjoy your weekend. We got 5 episodes for you next week for Dave and Ben. We'll talk to you on Monday. Thanks.
Want more of the Fantasy Football Today podcast and nonstop year-round fantasy advice? It's simple. Hit the subscribe button and hang with us all throughout the year.